Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
How does the sound level look, everybody? I think I look pretty good. Why don't you talk for me for a second there, Father Joe?
What do you want me to say? Something important?
There you go, old buddy of mine, old pal. Hey, who's that man at the door? Come on in, Nelson. And where you been? I've been down there looking for cops. Yeah, what's the word on the street? Nothing good, I'll tell you. Nothing good. Okay, here we go. 321
654.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert, alongside Father Joe Grimaldi, and we would like to welcome you to the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. Friends, at Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, we treasure your time. Isn't it time for you to experience the Star treatment? If you're in the greater Detroit area and you're looking for a new Lincoln, then Star Lincoln is your only answer. Father Joe Grimaldi and I have our new Lincoln Corsairs from Star Lincoln, but you may be thinking of something a little bigger, like the stunning Lincoln Nautilus, the sleek Lincoln Aviator, or the one-of-a-kind Lincoln Navigator. Shop online with Star Express. Swift, simple, safe. Browse for your new Lincoln online and customize and order your new Lincoln from home. It's that easy. Or drop by our beautiful showroom today and visit with one of our expert sales associates. Whatever you choose, you'll see why we've been selling Lincolns for over 50 years. Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield. Shop online at starlincoln.com, or you can call Star Lincoln at 248-354-4900. Well, how's your Advent going, sir?
It's going pretty nicely, I must say.
Yeah, it's
too quick.
Yeah, well, it's funny how time flies when you're having a good time.
That's right.
When you're staying busy.
How true.
Probably a busier time of the year for you, right?
It is, because you couple the ordinary celebrations of Mass with weddings and funerals.
And, well,
it makes time go real fast.
Yeah, but that never ends with you. You're always doing one.
No, I know. I have a wedding this week and a funeral next week. So
quick question for you. Is this a, I guess you answered the question for me. Do a lot of people like to be married around a holiday
I
like
wouldn't
Christmas?
say a lot, but there are some that do. I have two coming up. Naturally.
I'm a grumpy old man, as you know, and I just think that's it's odd to me, and I apologize to anybody listening to a podcast who's about to either get married or the fax machine has decided to chime in. It's very odd that our fax machine is coming in as we speak, but I hope I'm not offending anybody as we chime in on this. Am I the only person in the room thinking that sounds a little selfish to have your wedding around Christmas? You don't have to answer because you're the cleric in all of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking selfish is a pretty strong word.
I guess you're right. I mean, it just makes things a little more difficult for people because they have so much to do anyway with the holiday.
Yeah, but I think they are thinking how beautiful and romantic a Christmas wedding would be.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. Because, you know, what the reception hall comes with? Here comes that fax now. That's okay.
All you have to do is speak to Ann's sister, and you'll find out.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I was present for that.
Well, I know you were.
Hard to believe.
Well, let me just say this,
50,
though.
60 years ago.
You, no doubt about it. It was many, many moons ago. Yeah. The one thing it does come with is decorations, beautiful decorations. Every church, any banquet hall, any area that you go into this time of year around, the holidays, and then you combine it with a wedding, you're going to get the decorations for free.
To an extent, because Advent, the decorations are pretty subtle. I think what's happening is people use dry twigs and maybe some pines and things of that sort, but
right.
It's going to be very simple because they wait for Christmas Eve to truly...
Before you do the big blow-eat-up, if you will.
Because what happens is the weddings are usually... Well, for example, this week, I mentioned earlier that there is a wedding Friday night. There's another one next Friday. So it's...
Wow, that'll keep a priest busy, though.
It does.
Well, then let me just take it from the friendliest angle I can.
Yes.
It's hard on you for people to decide to have a wedding around this time of year because you've already got a lot on your plate.
Of course it is,
okay.
Yeah. But these things happen, as you well know.
Well, we recommend it during Lent You can have a wedding during Lent, right? That's not a good time either, though, is it?
Not only that, it's not recommended.
Yeah, I suppose now that I think about it, I can't remember ever going to a wedding during Lent.
Usually they try to be a lot more quiet at that time.
Well, so many people, are fasting.
Well, not only that, the church is not supposed to have a lot of decorations in it, so it cuts down on that part, which couples don't like.
Yeah, it's all about the couples. As you have said so many times before, folks, it's the ceremony and not necessarily the church and the photographers and everything else going on. But we've given that lesson way too many times. Today's podcast is all about alone together. I'm going to call and steal the line. Well, I'm not stealing anybody's line. Maybe Dave Mason, the musician. Dave Mason is a very, very, very talented musician, and the album did very, very well. He's gifted with his guitar playing ability, his voice, his ability to play several instruments. But here we are some 60 years later, and I was reading an article by a friend of mine who does a ton of text surveys and focus groups, more popular now than ever before, given the effects of COVID on so many areas of our life. And you and I were talking about this. It's amazing what COVID did in terms of pushing us back and also pushing us into new boxes that have never really been pushed into before. That's you.
Well, look how podcasts have developed.
Look at the podcasting.
And it was during
it exploded during COVID.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And March 2020 hit us. We did, I think, as a civilization, we did remarkable things with COVID. We learned how to exist. Do you remember there was nobody on the roads? I mean, people didn't know if they could go into grocery stores, and there were all sorts of. We didn't even have the shot yet. We were 8 months away from the first shot going in the arm, and so it's funny how a lot of things have changed. Before COVID, they were talking about a 4-day work week, and people would go, "Yeah, we'll get to that." They kicked the can down the road. Since COVID, they're desperately trying to get people back into the office, Joe. You know that.
Of course.
Because people got so comfortable.
Or into the church.
Well, exactly. That's where we're going to go. I didn't mean to take up all the time talking. I just wanted to set up the piece. Alone Together is the topic and the title. One of the things that my friend Fred Jacobs discovered in a recent focus group or groups is that people are now going to concerts alone. They don't need to go with a friend. What do they share in common? They're going to spend the money on one ticket and go alone because they love the artist, they love the show, and they're comfortable in their own skin. So they enjoy doing things alone, not just concerts, but other things as well. Going to a flea market, a fruit market, or doing other things, maybe even dining alone. How do I apply that to people that you see who now have decided they've gone through COVID, they've gone through these adjustments, they've decided they want to go to Mass and just be by themselves. Instead of just like, come on, hon, we got to go. It's time to get to Mass. I'm not denigrating it at all. How do you feel about people that really enjoy going to Mass alone?
Yeah, it's hard for me to see who they are and what they are because very often, the people that do come to Mass, they're going to come with their spouse. It's very difficult not to come with your spouse, because the two are living in the same house. They got up, got some juice and coffee and ready to go. Although I'm not too surprised if there are people that do like to do that without their spouse, because the men and the women each have different needs. It's not terrible for them to go and pray to God by themselves. They probably have to do that all the time, even at home, or would like to do that anyway. Let me put it that way. If we're speaking about big families, well, it's hard to get a family to come to church together anymore because the kids are involved in different activities, and therefore, when they do come, they'll come individually if they're old enough. Or maybe they'll come with the mother or the father or whoever's coming to this Mass. The other person goes to another Mass, or whatever the case might be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's happening, there's no question, but I don't get to see a lot of it myself.
But you probably do more at the one-offs in the morning, wouldn't you say?
You mean during the week?
During the week.
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
That's always one, yeah.
But don't you find that to be, do I want to say, a more intimate sort of a celebration of the Mass?
For the individual?
Yeah.
Well, of course, these people that come by themselves in the morning during the weekdays, well, many of them are widowed. But if they have a husband or a wife who's of the same religion, they usually will come together. But not with big families, as you're saying, just the two of them. And that seems to be still going for people over a certain age. Now, I see a lot of men and women who are married but are there by themselves. Usually it's because somebody is working, the other one is staying at home, or they're working in two different places, and therefore it's inconvenient to come together. So that's the kind of thing. When it's just two people living in a household, it's very difficult to do things by yourself.
Tell my wife that, will you?
Oh, I didn't say it doesn't happen, but it's very difficult.
My wife is gone from the minute she gets up until, she's just a run. God bless her.
Yeah.
But, she's got a lot on her plate every day, and she gets it done, with or without me. But as you said, as married couples, it's difficult for one to just jettison.
If they're both free, if they're both over a certain age, if they both, this type of thing. Obviously, if one of them is working in one place and the other in another.
I was just thinking about, like, I suspect, you had the golfer's mass, as you used to call it.
Right.
And it seemed to me, and I've been to a golfer's mass, and I've been to an 8 a.m. mass at St. Regis and at Holy Name, and they're interesting groups. I find myself, looking at different people as they come in, kind of wondering what that person does or why that person's there and what's going on over here. Just as you're sitting or waiting for Mass to begin, okay? And I know for a fact that a good friend of mine at Holy Name, I met him over at Holy Name once for Mass. It was a frigid morning, and people I hadn't seen in years were there, and they were kind of like, what are you doing here? If that makes sense to you. It was
sure.
It was almost like, I was like, where can I sit that I'm not in Bob's seat or Mary Ann's seat? But it just seemed, again, it was these people, for the most part. There weren't many people. There were probably 25 or 30 max, Joe. And I think very few were there as couples. But either way, it seemed to be just a very intent group of people. And I thought maybe more so because they were there alone with their own thoughts and their own wants and needs. Just wondering. So
yeah, I agree with you. There are people that do come alone, but they usually come alone for a reason. If they're married and living in the same house,
right? Okay,
it's difficult for one to, and I know you say it's not so difficult in your case, but not everybody's in the same situation.
No, I
as
realize
you.
that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if you're at a certain age and you're retired and the two of you at home, you tend to do things together like that. When you live alone, well, obviously, then you'll do these things alone. You're not looking for more company or anything of that sort. And it is intense for them to come to church and pray because they have special intentions that they're praying for. That's why they're there. But it doesn't mean that everybody, there are people that are married that do come by themselves. There's no question.
Yeah.
But that's not the norm.
No, I know. I'm just wondering as you look out, if you just, I'm not trying to evoke anything necessarily positive about, going to, a morning mass on a Tuesday alone. I'm just saying that given post-COVID now and reading this piece that Fred did, Alone Together, I found it fascinating. He does various applications. He doesn't do anything in terms of ministry in this at all. But I was just wondering the carryover effect. And you do a lot of things, and a lot of your time is spent alone, but you're very comfortable in your own skin.
Oh, yeah, I don't mind doing things by myself.
Why do you think that? I mean, why do you think certain people are more comfortable just running from one space to another, just having no problems at all being alone? You like to maybe just have a meal at home alone and watch a good movie, right?
At times I do, yes.
Okay.
But it's a rare occasion.
Only because you don't have somebody inviting you, though, right?
Right.
Don't you on occasion just love to be alone?
Definitely.
Yeah.
If I've gone out for 5 out of the 7 nights,
yeah,
I cherish those times.
Yeah, put those big feet of yours up on a stool there at the end of the chair and go for it and just sort of put on an older movie and fall asleep.
Correct.
Well, don't fall asleep now. Don't fall asleep. We're getting close to the end. Did you know that, for example, here in Detroit, fewer people in Detroit carpool than I think anywhere else in the country? We don't travel well as carpoolers. We would rather be alone in our cars, alone with our thoughts, alone together. You know who they want to hang out with? Their friends on the radio. That's why this whole study sort of came out of this area.
And I agree with it completely.
Yeah.
It's just that I think it's more than Detroit, though, because everybody loves to have their own wheels.
Well,
I mean, one of the most difficult things to do is to remove the driving privileges of someone who's reached a certain age.
Believe me, yeah.
Because it means like my independence is now gone.
You know why Detroit is so bad? Or I shouldn't say so bad. It's not good, though, especially the metro area surrounding Detroit and Detroit proper. Mass transit here is not the finest.
No, and I agree with you. It never has been.
It has always been. You can, but I defy you to do it because there's no comfort zone at all. Go from where we are right now without at least a 1 mile walk to get a bus and standing on a mound of grass, no protection whatsoever, and waiting for the 415 to take you to Woodward Avenue to start your trip downtown.
I don't know if that's. Do you think that would be a real motivation, though, not to go with your wife?
No.
Or your husband?
Oh no. You're talking about Mass now?
No, anything.
Well, I don't know the demographic, but I'm going to make you a bet that I'm right on it. I'm willing to bet you that the people that Fred basically was speaking with were in their 30s and maybe early 40s. There's that group that just has changed the paradigm for a lot of different generations in terms of what they like to do.
But are these people married or not?
And I don't know. No. I mean, it doesn't. Nothing in it got that deep.
But I think if you live alone, you like being alone. I always maintain that a couple that gets married for the first time when they're in their 30s or 40s, it's not as easy as when you're in your 20s because you're so used to doing whatever you... If I want to do laundry at 2 in the morning, I don't have to answer to anybody. However, with somebody else, and honey, excuse me, I have to do this right now. Or I have to go to the drugstore. Do you need anything? When you've lived alone for a long time, the only thing you want to do is go alone anywhere, whether it's the drugstore, whether it's to the game, whether it's to the movie. You want to do that alone. I mean, I think that's a normal reaction.
I think you're absolutely right. I can't imagine. I've never heard of anyone going to the, I don't want to even say the name because they don't deserve having their name mentioned, the ticket vendor that's out there that owns all tickets in the universe. And Taylor Swift would certainly be a good example of how a classic fail is a classic fail. And that's what happens when one company controls an entire industry, said Ken, the still angry radio personality, and how that whole company worked. But with that said, imagine going to that service and getting a ticket for one. I can't imagine that, but apparently there are a lot of people just, saying, look, I don't have to worry about when I leave. I don't have to worry about picking somebody up. I don't have to worry about where I park. I just drive, park my car, go into the concert, have a heck of a good time, maybe buy a souvenir, get in my car, and I go home.
Yeah, I don't know if the study was made with married people in mind, because I can't imagine. Oh, I love to be alone. I'm going to drive to the concert by myself. You can stay home and cook.
Well,
Or you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have just the two people in the house, it's difficult for someone to just do something of that sort by themselves. Now, if you're used to living alone and you are alone, you don't want company. You don't want to call a lot of people and say, listen, would you go with me to the movies tomorrow night? Maybe that's the people.
Classic example of that, yeah. How many times, he mentions that as well, by the way, the woman that did the
Survey?
the survey is NME, and they surveyed more than 1,100, simply put, music fans. So those would be individuals. There's no demographic here with it. And they were taught, those were the questions about going to a movie alone, going to a concert alone, going to anything entertainment-wise, maybe going to a bar or a restaurant where there might be some music, and just going alone. So it just seemed that there's an increase in people rolling solo. That's how we'll end it, all right?
Yeah, but could I say this too?
You can say
for
whatever,
my own information.
say whatever you want.
For my own information.
Sure.
I have a hard time accepting what you just said, only because if it is a single person, they would rather go alone than call their best friend to go with them. I agree with that. However, if they live in an apartment with the spouse, to say that they're going to get in a car and go by themselves is not the easiest thing in the world to do, okay?
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that. However, if somebody does live alone, they're not going to make the phone call to their best friend or to other people and say, would you come with me? We could go to the concert together. I would rather go alone.
All right. Well, that's exactly where
I wonder if that's where the
well,
people
I think
are.
that's what came out of this was that instead of like, I once heard a comedian who was talking about going into a store. She was shopping and she was by herself, and the woman that was waiting on her said, "Oh, that would look nice on you. Oh, that would be perfect." Everything she picked up and looked at, she went, "Oh, I love that color on you. That looks great." And she turned to her and said, "You know, if I wanted to shop with a friend, I would have brought one.
That's right.
So why don't you go over there and mark something down, and maybe I'll look at it."
Yeah.
And so you bring up a great point. Okay, let's end with this for the third time. But you see, this one, I guarantee you, people are riding. I hope they're not riding alone in the car. I hope they're listening with somebody else. We don't want this podcast to be alone together. We want this one to be together alone. All right. But my point is simply this: that if your baseline is you are single and living alone, that's what I think she's starting with. If you're single and living alone,
yeah.
do you reach out and call your buddy and say, "Let's go to the concert. We both love Taylor Swift. We have to go together." Or do you just say, I'm going alone?
That's okay. That makes sense to me.
But again, however, I suppose it's going to go on for another 10 years. The survey came out of what we took from COVID. And
because at COVID, we were forced to be alone in our house, and we don't want other people.
That's right.
There.
That's right.
However, if you're married, it's a different story.
Once after a month in the woods alone, we finally learned how to start a campfire.
Yeah, we don't need to have a group of people around us.
If I have to, I'll eat squirrel.
That's right.
By God. So, speaking of God, thank you for hearing us. We're not alone in this world, ladies and gentlemen. There's a wonderful, wonderful person in place for all of us. Our dear Lord. And Father Joe Grimaldi's got a prayer for us.
Heavenly Father, particularly during this season when we look forward to your first coming on earth and walking in the midst of humanity, making yourself vulnerable, we ask that you please try to understand us as we struggle through our lives especially in this semi-normal way of life after the COVID. So we ask you to bless us and our families now and forever. Amen. God bless you all. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.